Hi, and welcome to Journey Forward with Jory Rose, where you will gain insights, tools, and inspiration to get unstuck and live your best life. Jory is a licensed marriage and family therapist with a passion for helping people cultivate awareness and authenticity so they can show up fully in all aspects of their life. And now, here's Jory.
Hey everyone, you are in for a real special treat with this upcoming episode. It is journeys like Rob's that inspire me to believe that growth and change are possible. And this is exactly why I do the work that I do. So if you've been stuck and you want to get unstuck to live fully and authentically and free from the challenges that hold you back, then I invite you to join me in the spring cohort of the Journey Forward method, which is beginning the end of March. And I've got a special offer for you this week. In honor of my daughter's 16th birthday, I'm offering a special discount. So go to the link in the show notes and type in the code SWEET16 when you sign up for the spring cohort of the Journey Forward method. I cannot wait for you to be able to cultivate the tools to help you live the life you want to be living. I hope also that you enjoyed today's episode. Thank you so much for tuning in. Hey everyone, welcome back to Journey Forward with Jory Rose. I am really honored to spend my morning with Rob Mack. Rob, thank you so much for joining us. I can't wait to have what I know is going to be an awesome conversation and bring people lots of joy and happiness. But before we delve in, please introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about your journey and really how you got to where you are.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Jory. I'm a happiness coach, and I'm the least likely happiness coach probably on the planet because I struggle with happiness my entire life. I felt like I was born unhappy and depressed and stressed and anxious and self-loathing. And I always thought I would just grow out of it, over the years. I would eventually maybe become a professional basketball player. That was always my dream. And I'll do well in school maybe, and hopefully I'll do well socially, and maybe I'll even have a girlfriend one day and some money. And lots of those things happened. Most of those things happened except for the basketball part. And I just became more and more depressed. And I got to a place where I was so depressed, I became or started experiencing suicidal ideation.
Wow.
Dozens of times a day. Got to a place, did some research, decided I was going to slash my wrist. That was the means by which I would kill myself. And just had the strangest experience, Jory. Like I went to the kitchen to get the kitchen knife, dig it into my wrist. And, when you're suicidal, you want to escape the pain. You don't want to increase any pain in your life, right? So you're always a little, hesitant to do it.
Yeah.
The knife in my wrist, and for no good reason. And without anything in my external conditions changing. I mean, I had a good life. I had a, beautiful girlfriend, brilliant. I had health. I had 2 beautiful German cars, a great job. I mean, family that loved me. I just felt this inexplicable peace and joy and love kind of wash over me. And so I decided, strangely enough, that I was going to postpone the suicide for I don't know, I say 15 minutes, but quite frankly, I was probably only committed to a few minutes.
Wow.
And in that 15 minutes, I just started doing some research here and there. And things began to shift from that point forward.
Wow. So your life literally changed in 15 minutes.
Yes.
You saved your life in those 15 minutes.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. It's like something saved my life. And I think it was me getting out of my own way. And it's taken me probably 20 years to really process and understand what happened there. But I think for the first time in my life, my mind was real quiet. And in that quiet, in that gap, in that silence, that peace and love and happiness even started shining through.
Yeah. Wow. It's such an intense visual, and thank you for sharing it so vulnerably. And depression is confusing, and maybe before we get into the happiness and joy piece, because I know, as a therapist, I work with depression all the time. There's loved ones in my life who experience depression. And I think the average person who does not have exposure to depression or loved ones who experience depression, there's a big confusion around, but you have such a great life. What do you have to be depressed about? And that is, I think, one of the major disconnects from understanding that internal pain does not be based on external factors.
Absolutely right. If it did, all the super successful, famous people would be happier than everyone else.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
we know the science does not bear that out, right? And we know
Right.
our own personal experiences do not bear that out. I have had and been in some of the worst circumstances in my life, and yet felt at peace and deeply loved and even joyful.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been at the White House or at the most incredible party ever and been deeply depressed or unhappy or sad or even suicidal.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're absolutely right. Certainly living below a level of subsistence, right? So if you can't pay your basic bills, if you're not safe, if you don't have food and shelter, okay, more money and more accomplishments and a better quote unquote quality of life will sort of improve your life satisfaction.
Sure.
But not your subjective well-being.
Right. And that's the key there. It's subjective.
Subjective.
You know, it is. And suicide is something that has affected my life greatly. My father committed suicide when I was 10. And it's interesting because I wasn't very close with him. My parents divorced when I was about 3. And from the ages of 7 until 10, I really only saw him a couple of times a year because I lived in Northern California and he was in Southern Cal. So it was kind of that typical, summer break and winter break vacations with dad kind of thing. And no one ever talked to my family about depression. No one ever, it was not something, I don't even know that, his close circle even understood. And no one ever actually, and I'm 44 years old, and no one has ever actually said the words to me still to this day, Daddy killed himself and shot himself with a gun. Like no one's ever actually told me what happened. And I only know that that was the case. And I saw his death certificate a couple years ago. And of course I knew, but I had one day, being a curious little kid, opened up his nightstand drawer as kids explore, right? And I saw a gun in the nightstand. And that freaked the shit out of me. So years later, when he died, no one had to tell me because I knew. But interestingly enough, we processed his death, but never really processed depression or suicide. And many years later, a very close family friend who was really a part of the healing process from my dad's death committed suicide many years later. And all of us were kind of like, what the fuck? Why would he do that when he saw the pain it caused the rest of us? And I also, now as a therapist, really interestingly enough to say, I can't judge anybody who's in that place because I don't know what it's like to be in that moment. And it's so easy to take on this narrative of, oh, what is their life so bad about? Or, how could they be so selfish to not worry about the rest of us? That's a really naive narrative.
It sure is. It sure is. First of all, thank you for sharing that. Like, I just feel so deeply honored that you would share that with me.
Yeah.
And all of us. And there's no question about it. It's hard. I mean, this psychology of separate realities thing is real. We all live in our own little world.
Yeah.
And it seems like we don't, during most of the days until you bump up against somebody who has a totally different perspective. It's hard to remember that we all experience, quote unquote, big R reality, in much different ways. And if you've had an experience with stress or anxiety or fear, just magnify that by 100 or 1,000 or 100,000, right? So when I was a little kid, my dad would sometimes joke and say, you were scared of your own shadow kind of thing, And we've all had the experience where maybe we thought a monster was under the bed or whatnot. It's so real to you. It's so real.
Oh, I used to sleep with my back to my window for years and had that narrative. If I have the covers in a certain position and if I don't look at the window, then the monsters won't come in and get me. Like I believed that to a T. That was,
yes.
Real.
There you go, right? We all have had that experience. And if you have had that experience, it's, maybe in terms of degree, different, but qualitatively it's the same. We find our beautiful brains terrorizing ourselves in ways that feel hard to kind of get a handle on or to cope with. And it can be extraordinarily painful, and it can be very difficult to understand if you haven't been through it yourself.
Yeah. So you had those 15 minutes where you're like, I all of a sudden feel peace. let me just put off the suicide for a few more minutes. And I'm laughing, and I don't mean to,
Oh, it's
negate the
laughable.
power of that moment, but I think it's really a powerful visual to say, well, wait, let me just get curious what's happening with me right now, because what I'm experiencing in this moment doesn't really relate to this intention I set 5 minutes ago. Let me get curious about that.
You nailed it. It was curiosity. And
Mm-hmm.
one of my signature strengths is I'm always wondering. As a kid, I think probably lots of us in the helping profession, particularly, as therapists or coaches, we ask a lot of why questions. And as a kid, I would ask why, why is the grass green, Mom? And why is the sky blue? And it was just incessant. And I know I drove my wonderful mom crazy. She never admit that, but I drove her crazy. And that's precisely what it was. It was just this self-rumination that was endless. And
Mm-hmm.
right when the self-rumination came to an end, at least for a moment or micro moment, and I had this subjective experience that was totally different, despite nothing externally changing. That's the mind-blowing part,
Right.
Is that was when the disconnect happened in a really healthy way, which was like, oh wait, like all these books and cliches and platitudes that I've heard or read, maybe there's something there somewhere, and I haven't looked closely enough at it or into it. And so that began the journey. Now, the suicidal ideation did not end. It wasn't like all that ended. It was just that I had a slightly, ever so slightly, but significantly different relationship with those suicidal thoughts.
Which, that ability to separate it out and observe it rather than be in the middle of it is exactly what I teach as a mindfulness-based therapist, right? That's the point of, in my mind, the point of meditation. How can I just observe what's arising rather than be in the middle of this experience? And if I can observe it, I can see the forest for the trees. If I can observe it, I can recognize that this doesn't define me. It's not permanent. It's not personal. It's not going to last forever. And in that space, I can say, oh, wow, that's really interesting. This is what's coming up. And in that space, I can intentionally choose, how do I want to respond to it?
That's right. You can see the crazy and not be the crazy.
Yes.
And it's profound that, and it mostly is invisible to us, or it seems invisible to us most of our lives, which is like, I'm not my thoughts, and I'm not thinking reality. No matter what I'm thinking, I'm always thinking a version of reality. I'm always approximating reality, but I can't really think reality. But just that recognition or realization that if I can observe it, I'm not it. Like,
yes,
okay, I'm having this thought, but what's aware of the thought? I'm having this feeling, but what's aware of the feeling? There's something that has to be different from that feeling or that thought in order to even recognize or pick up that the thought and feeling is there. And so what is that? What is this awareness, this consciousness thing that is thoughtless and is feelingless, and yet can recognize and experience thinking and feeling?
Yeah. It's so simple and so hard, right? Like, that's the challenge. Like, it's really, really quite simple. Enacting it, that's a whole nother story and a whole nother practice. But I think the fascinating thing that anyone who's listening right now, like, I think one of like this really first big takeaways of no matter what it is that you're stuck in, right, is anywhere from, I often say, whether you're sitting in traffic or dealing with cancer, the tools are the same, right? Honestly. And I don't mean to diminish the power of either one, because if you're sitting in traffic and full of rage, that could have significant implications, right? Dealing with cancer being life-threatening. So to me, it's all about how you utilize tools in the moment to respond and not react, right? But I think the key that I want to point out is you had that one moment of peace. And I think people are like, oh, I want to grab onto that and then strive and cling to that. But the key for me, and I want to hear your experience with this, is it's not about how long that moment's going to last. It's recognizing that that moment was possible. And if it was possible once, it can be possible again. And if it lasted for 1 second, maybe next time it can last for 2 seconds. And maybe next time it can last for 5 seconds. And if I can just hold on to the fact that that moment of peace was possible, that's almost enough, right?
Shivers.
Yeah?
You
Okay,
must have read my mind. That's precisely it. That's exactly it. It's just rinse, wash, and repeat.
Yes.
Right? So, and that's the discovery. It's like, And I try and, I'm always wanting to remind myself and others about that if you've experienced anything for a single moment or a micro moment, you can do it again. You can have it again. And yes, it is a practice. It is an art. It is a skill. But so was walking and talking and brushing your teeth and all the things. Everything is difficult until it's easy. And then when it's easy, it's automatic.
Yes. I love that visual of, imagine how many times a baby falls down when learning to walk. To think that, I can't harness that moment again, it would be like the baby, starting to walk, seeing everyone around them walking, and then being like, but I keep falling down. So you know what? I'm just going to give up even trying because this walking business just must not be for me.
Yes.
Do you imagine like if that was the mentality of a baby?
Well, you nailed it. That's why it's called childlike faith, right? It's childlike faith because there is no turning back and looking into the past. There is no, projecting and forecasting into the future. There's just, I fell down, I get up. It's perfect, pure presence.
And there's no deliberation there. They're not like, should I think about whether I should get back up? Yeah. Do I think I'm worthy of getting back up? Do you think they're judging me that I kept falling down? Like, look at that narrative that babies just aren't doing.
That's right. Discursive thought is lacking. I mean, the prefrontal cortex isn't even developed yet, right? So it's like
not even close.
Not even close, right? I mean, years and years and years and years away from that. So you just nailed it. And there's such beauty and power in that. And I love this expression that a mystic is just a twice born child. That a happy person essentially is just a twice born child.
I love that. Yeah.
And I just feel that through and through. Like there's so much to be learned from children. And from small pets like Buddha you've got there.
Like my little puppy in the background. Yeah. Yes, he's a big teacher for me. I've often thought, wouldn't it be amazing if when a baby was born and all the adults in the life of this child come and hover over this newborn's crib or they're holding them for the first time. And instead of telling this child, you're so perfect, look how perfect you are. Wouldn't it be incredible if all those loving, supportive adults looked at this little born baby and said, you know what? Life is going to suck a lot of the time. And just so you know, it's not your fault. It won't last forever. And we'll still always love you. Like if we were grown to believe that it was okay to not be happy all the time, it was okay to feel shitty and to have negative thoughts or to, be hard on yourself and to know that that was human versus something is wrong with me.
Absolutely. Well,
I think the world would be a different place if that was the case.
Yes, it would. And I love that so much. And I couldn't agree with you more. And the only silver lining and benefit to it not being better in that particular way is that we are driven and led to a discovery of our own that we value in ways that we could not otherwise value if it was given to us at birth.
I agree.
That's
the journey wouldn't be the same, right?
No, like my appreciation for happiness now, oh my God, it's so much greater than it could have possibly been had I experienced a life that was charmed, so to speak, or happy, or full of love. So yes, I love what you're saying. And I think, certainly we've over-rotated and we're over-indexed in the other direction way too far. And so hopefully the work that you and I are doing is, helping to right that balance.
Yeah.
But I agree with you there, Jory.
So take us on the next steps of your journey. How did you go from those moments and harnessing those moments of peace to actually becoming the happiness coach? And did you actually cultivate the happiness you were seeking?
Yeah.
Because I mean, we're just doing audio here, but if you guys follow Rob on Instagram and any social media, have seen his work, you exude joy. You have just such a beautiful energy of joy that I see that you embody this. So clearly you've done that work. And take us on that journey, because I know that didn't happen overnight.
Says the light herself. Oh my gosh, I will receive that and also reflect that back to you.
Thank you.
Absolutely, and I mean that. I had no idea what I was doing. Okay, I still don't know what I'm doing. And I don't really care. That's the difference.
Do we all ever really know, Rob?
No, No, not really. I mean, I made one very significant decision in my life, and it feels like it was made for me, honestly, which is that I decided I was going to live as blissfully as humanly possible or not live at all. Okay. So I had a leg up, in my suicidal ideation and my depression. I feel like I had an advantage that hasn't been bestowed upon everyone in that particular way. It's like when you've almost drowned once or twice, like you either learn to swim really good or you don't learn to swim at all. And so that was me. I just had a very laser focus on this happiness thing. And so I just started doing what I always do, which is read and learn from people who are a lot smarter than me. So I just read every book I get my hands on, and I just tore those books up. I mean, to this day, the books that I have and own are more valuable than my car or my house or any of those things to me, genuinely.
Yeah.
So all I did was a ton of research, and then I started applying as much of it as I possibly could. Like the stuff that resonated, like a lot of stuff I didn't do, like the exercise in the back of the book. Oftentimes I would be like, nah, it doesn't feel like me. So I didn't do it. Maybe later I found out that I should have done it and it was for me, but I just started applying it. And then I started tracking it in a journal I had. And then that journal became a book, Happiness from the Inside Out. And, that led to other things, but it was a long journey because I didn't know what I wanted to do. I was really looking for my life purpose. And I was probably looking for that since the age of like 3 or 4. Honestly, I always felt like, what am I here for? Why is life so painful? It's got to be a reason. And so I just, read all the books on that. They helped all in their own ways. But it was eventually discovering that my purpose was hidden and hiding in all this pain. That's the mind-blowing thing. It's like you see those pictures or statues of like a laughing Buddha. And I can appreciate in my little tiny small way that it is very laughable that I was begging for something that was always right under my nose the entire time, but maybe poorly wrapped.
Yeah. And easier said than done, right? Because I can imagine a lot of people are like, okay, well, I read a lot and I'm trying to apply the tools, but I still feel suicidal or I still feel like shit. So what would you say to those people? Were you also getting counseling at the time and outside support? Was this all this internal journey? So I think sometimes people just want to know, I just want the formula. Can you just give me the formula? I'm not trying to diminish it to a formula, but when that's not, when that doesn't always work, how do we get past those roadblocks?
Yeah. So the first thing I'll say to those folks is welcome to the human race again. Welcome to the human race party again.
Yes.
That's why we are all feeling that. We all experiencing that. And it's also true that there's a way out of a lot of that. There's a way to reduce, if not eliminate, lots of that. And I'm a living testament to that. I would have never thought that was possible, honestly, and so if I were to sort of I didn't see a counselor, I didn't see a therapist, I didn't see a psychologist or a psychiatrist, although I wanted to. I was concerned about 2 things. One, the stigma associated with it. At that time, and I'm no, young chicken, but it's like spring chicken. But I would say that I was concerned about losing my job, my consulting job at the time. And it wasn't so clear that I'd heard stories about people that had issues and they lost a job in some way. So I was concerned about that. I was also fairly convinced that my depression was neurological or really about my biochemistry and in nature. And so I just thought, well, there's nothing they can do. And I didn't know where the drugs were at that point in time, where they were with all the psychopharmaceuticals. So any case, didn't do that. Now, if I were to reduce everything I learned down to the nuts and bolts, and this is a terrible oversimplification, but it's the truth. I'd say that first and foremost, I identified all the people, places, things, and activities that brought me intrinsic joy. And I scheduled as many of them into my life as humanly possible. I call those happiness islands. I identified all the things that brought people, places, things, like activities that brought me intrinsic pain, right? And I did everything to reverse engineer those out of my life, get them off my plate. So that's outsource, delegate, reduce, eliminate, automate, or regulate those things, okay? And then, right? And the people part of it was a huge part. It was like, this emotional contagion thing is real. If somebody in your life is really miserable or mean or cruel or narcissistic or any of those things, like it would be really hard for you to be happy in their presence, no matter how happy you get. Like,
which is so much easier said than done, because people want the outcome without doing the real work, right? And so I think what you just said is really, really worth like highlighting bigger. If there's people in your life that do not align with the person you're trying to become, they're not your people right now.
And you can love
And
them
you,
for distance. It
yes,
doesn't mean you're not loving them. In fact, you can love them in a bigger, better way. Okay. If you can also focus some of that love and attention on yourself, like get some
yeah,
distance from them. You'll be surprised at how much more lovable people seem when they're not up in your business all day, every day.
yeah. And drawing boundaries is scary and hard. And, you know, one of the things I love about guiding people on drawing boundaries is people often fear drawing boundaries because they fear they're going to be perceived as mean, as rude, as inconsiderate, as unkind, right? Like that's our fear of, if I put up a boundary, what's the judgment I'm going to receive? But to help people understand that drawing a boundary is not just saying what you can't do, or like, here's my wall. It's also, where's the open door? And when people can recognize that it's not just putting this hand out and saying no more, but giving permission to what is permissible within your own value set, now you don't have to be perceived as being rude, because there's a great quote that is in the new Brene Brown book, and I forget who it's by, but it says, to paraphrase, like, boundaries are a way of me loving you and loving myself at the same time.
Oh, gorgeous. I love it. It's so
Yeah.
beautiful. You're absolutely right. It's a boundary, not a wall.
Yes.
Right. And it's about positive communication. You know, I am so conflict avoidant. I don't want any conflict in my life. You know, I had enough growing up, and I'm good on the conflict piece. So I don't love, and I've never particularly loved drawing boundaries until I discovered precisely what you're saying, which is that you can say no to X, Y, and Z, but you can also say yes to A, B, and C. And you can focus the conversation on what you're saying yes to, not what you're saying no to. You know, because as much as it's sort of a cliche, and cliches become cliches for good reason.
Yes.
You know, what you resist persists. And so when you're putting a boundary, if you only speak to what you don't want to have happen and what you don't want to feel and what the other person should not do, all that's going to happen often is they keep doing more of it and you keep giving into more of it.
Yes.
And so, you know, you just don't extinguish undesirable behavior by continuing to give it attention.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's, you know, we can talk about it tangibly or energetically, law of attraction, right? If everything is energy, you know, I love the phrase that energy flows where intent goes. So if you're only focusing everything on what's not working, well, that's where your entire focus is residing. And how's that working for you, right?
You just nailed it. Like one
Yeah.
of the, you know, and gosh, I love this conversation with you. I just have to
I do too.
rant there. Like I'm getting all jazzed up about it. And, you know, it's interesting because at the beginning, I think, of my journey, I'd heard, not quite as eloquently or anything like what you're sharing, but I had heard, you know, small little bite-sized pieces of this. And it always felt so complex because it was very complex. It was all new and unfamiliar and unpracticed. But when I look at it, it was simple. But now when I look back, it's like profound how the simple things are the most powerful things, right? And what you're saying is so true. It's like you're not going to be able to feel peace by focusing on the lack of peace. You can't feel happy by focusing on all the unhappy aspects of yourself, other people, or the world. It just seems so simple, but it's so profound.
Yeah.
And we consistently try to do this thing where we're like, no, I'll just focus on what's wrong and I'll feel right. But it can never work that way.
The mind doesn't work that way. It doesn't.
No.
So let me ask you. So, okay, so you decreased what was causing you pain, which makes conscious choices, right? You have to be conscious to get on a different path. It's not just going to happen conceptually. I love it. I give an example about this. And, you know, this goes back to what we know in neuroscience, that how we actually rewire habits is through what's called experience-dependent neuroplasticity, which is a fancy way of saying you got to do something different to actually get a different outcome. So I like to give this funny example because I'm not a runner. I don't like to run. I would be one of those people who has the 0.0 bumper stickers on the back of their car because I am not running any marathons, but I physically know how to run, right? I can do it, but I don't want to endure and do that longer. But if, let's say I did one day decided I'm going to run a marathon, I would have to physically go and train my body to do something I already know how to do. I would be training it for endurance, for breathing, for strength, for mindset, right? But I can't just sit here in my chair on my couch, curled up next to my dog or my kids and be like, let me just think about running. Let me just visualize what it would feel like to run 26.2 miles. It wouldn't make any change, right? So like you actually have to do the thing to make the change happen, both in your brain and in your experience. But people are like, but that's hard. Yeah, but so is being unhappy.
Oh my gosh, right? I often say, in the beginning, happiness is hard, but in the end, it makes everything else easy.
Yeah.
And there's a master key to that. This is why, I love this conversation. I love the science of applied positive psychology. Because one of the many findings is that if you want to achieve anything in your life, if you can find a way to get happy without whatever it is you want, you not only are happy, which is the point and purpose of all the stuff you want anyway, but you also tend to attract or get all the stuff you want, right? So it's a master key to getting what you want. We know happy people live 67 years longer. They make $700,000 more on average over the course of their entire lifetime. They get married earlier, stay married longer. They're happy in all their relationships, whether married or not. They're rated as more attractive. They're also, quote unquote, better people. They give more time and money and energy and blood, right? All these things. But in order to get, let's say, happier, you do have to work at it. And it doesn't have to feel like hard work. In the beginning, it often can, but you can break it down to super small, tiny, bite-sized pieces, and you can make that quote unquote work super fun. Like one of the discoveries I had was that I can make almost everything a lot more fun than it currently is just by doing it more slowly or doing it with friends or doing it in bite-sized pieces or adding music, and so there's always a way to do what you want to do in a way that's a ton more fun and doesn't feel nearly as painful. And if you do that and prioritize blisscipline over sort of being disciplined, it's being committed to bliss.
Oh,
right?
I love that word, Rob. Blisscipline.
Yes. If you can just.
I'm putting that on a Post-it note.
Yeah, I love it. Right. If you just do that, like I've discovered when I just did that I was consistent in a way that I otherwise wouldn't be because I didn't dread it anymore. And when you can prioritize consistency over intensity, all of a sudden you get drastically different positive results without all that pain and effort, So you don't have to just slug it out. You can.
Well, and go ahead.
That's it. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I think like for me, one of the parts of the language that I put on that is a simple shift, because to me, language is really, really, really powerful. And the language we speak in our own mind impacts everything, right? So even a shift from I have to I get to is all of a sudden right there. And I want to share this little quick story because I think this is really powerful around how we can perceive these hard tasks. Back in 2017, and I'm up in the Bay Area, and back in 2017 was one of the first really big wildfire seasons that we had up here. And during the fire season, the camp that my kids had gone to since they were young had burned down. And it was devastating. I mean, it was heartbreaking. And plus all of the people in the area that had lost their homes. And I know it was a direct result of the stress and fear and sadness that I felt. But by the end of that week, I had developed really, really horrible lower back pain, which not surprisingly is related to the root chakra that relates to safety and security. So made perfect sense to me what was going on. I got it. And I could barely lean over just to bend or put on clothes or whatever. That Sunday night, my house was a mess. My kids were unusually not very helpful. They usually were more helpful. And there was laundry to be done and dishes that had to be done. And I could barely move my back. And this simple mindset of, I'm so grateful to have a home in which I have all these chores to do. And people right now would give whatever they could to have a home that they could go do laundry and go put away the dirty dishes. And it shifted something in me of, I don't have to do this right now. I get to do this. And my entire relationship to both my physical pain and the chores that were physically hard because of my physical pain, everything just eased. Because it was, I have the privilege of having a sink full of dishes right now that some people don't have. And it's a very simple but powerful mindset shift, language shift. And then it made the task actually kind of blissful.
Oh, so
because
good.
it was an honor to have a place to have a dirty dish in laundry. And it shifted everything.
So powerful. I love that story. Like, what a powerful story. And I think hopefully all of us have an example like that in our own lives, right? Our own lives. There's an expression in Zen, which you probably know, which is, it's only painful to do the dishes when you're not doing the dishes. It's only painful to do anything if you're not doing it. In other words, if your mind is distracted, if you're thinking about all the things that happened in the past, all the things that happen in the future, or all the additional dishes that you have to do after this one dish that's in your hand now. But when you're really in the experience of doing what you're doing, and you're either focused on gratitude or you're focused on presence, meaning you're not lost in discursive thinking, you're not overthinking, you're not overanalyzing, you're not in the future, not in the past, you're just feeling the water in your hands, just feeling the dish. You smell the smells, whatever comes from it. You'll notice that actually this activity that felt or seemed to be such a nuisance before, with presence, is perfectly enjoyable. And if not enjoyable, certainly acceptable, right? It's not nearly as painful as we think it is. And so, it always reminds me of that Mark Twain quote. He said, I've experienced countless tragedies in my life, most of which never happened.
Never happened. Yes.
And one of those is the dishes. And one of those is the kids. And one of those is, X, Y, and Z. But you nailed it. Like the gratitude piece, the presence piece, it's just critical.
Yes. So what were some of the ways that you brought more joy in? What did some of those things look like? Because I imagine it's the same thing as that one moment of a piece of, if I can have joy doing this and I can harness that, then I can lengthen it and remember the possibility of it. So what were some of those things that you did?
Yeah. So in the beginning, I was mostly action focused, right? Activity focused. You're right. So I discovered that, I didn't know a whole lot, and then maybe I would never figure out what I wanted to do for a career. So I kind of came around to that, and I said, well, what do I know for sure? It does bring me joy. Being in the sun does. Living in Miami does. I love that idea. Also, not being at work. I did not like my job. I like the people there, but I really did not like my work, and that's putting it lightly. And
what kind of work was it at the time?
I was a management consultant. Consultant, so we'd do these big technology projects, and I'd come in and we'd work way too many hours, and that whole deal. And some people just love it and they're great at it, and I was not so much. So I actually decided, well, I'm going to find a way to move to Miami. Now, in the addiction community, you call that pulling it geographic, and that's not generally recommended. It's like, that's not going to solve this inner thing that's happening with
wherever you go, there you are. So that's part of the challenge with that. Exactly.
But I said, well, this is all I know for now. I know I'm so much happier in the sunshine and the beach. I did that. I eventually, through some serendipitous sort of circumstances, I left and lost it sort of consulting job. I was offered another job. I didn't want it. So I said, hey, I'm going to go find a job somewhere else. I also discovered how much I loved reading again, right? I love reading. I was reading a little of the time. So I'm going to start spending more time reading. I also discovered, and I had the most incredible girlfriend. I mean, she was brilliant and spoke 5 languages, and she was beautiful. Wow. But we were not making each other happy, or we were both struggling. So we, sort of dissolved that relationship. And so it was things like that. And they were big decisions. I think the one thing I kind of had to keep in mind at that time, which was really hard, was that I was drowning and I needed to save myself. Like, it was like that. It was like, I need to be selfish, like really selfish. Because if I'm not authentically selfish, I'm never going to be authentically selfless. Like, that was big. And it was hard. Every day it was hard, because I just wanted nothing more than to call this girlfriend who I knew was suffering so much too, and just get this back into this, this really unhappy experience. And
what you're describing as selfish, I would really redefine as self-care.
Totally. Absolutely. I couldn't see, the boundary wasn't so clear for me. And so I felt like I had to over-index and over-rotate hard. And so you're right. It was just ultimately self-care. And it was also care for others. I was not realizing, but also recognizing, this consulting company probably doesn't love this miserable guy showed up every single day at his job. And so it's actually a benefit to them too. It's like happiness, my happiness, your happiness is our gift to the world.
Yeah. And so then what? So you
Yeah.
ended
So
the relationship, you got in the sun, you were doing more reading, and you still
I
had to create a life for yourself.
yes, I eventually moved, petitioned with the consulting company. I moved to Florida. Sometime after that, I left the consulting company. I was getting an MBA in Miami, and I was trying to find a job because I needed to pay the bills, and that was quickly becoming a problem. And I was walking down Lincoln Road one day, and some guy came up to me and said, "Hey, you ever modeled?" And I said, "Oh no, I never modeled." I thought he was for sure like teasing me, maybe even, or making fun of me. I had a terrible self-concept and self-image. And he said, "Well, if you're ever interested, stop by the modeling agency." Gave me a card. I just kind of tried to forget about that. And then it happened again another week later with somebody different. I eventually went into the modeling agency because I was strapped for cash, and I began this like 10-year modeling and acting career. So I did that while I just continued reading my Don't Kill Yourself books and journaling about it. And that was like the next 10 years or so.
Wow.
Yeah.
I imagine for some people that could have been a really hard path to go into the modeling and acting because there's so much comparison and judgment in that field. How did that not add to more of some of the old habits of self-loathing and, not feeling worthy? I mean, I'm putting words in your mouth, but, I imagine so much of it feels superficial, like at least that's a perception.
Yeah. I think,
how did you not get stuck in a negative spiral for that?
Yeah. So this time I was already climbing out pretty aggressively out of the depression. And I also saw as part of like, I guess, call it my dharma, although I didn't have that language at the time, but it was like, I saw it as practice. Like I was like, I need to practice this thing. Like I really struggle with this like comparison, like competition.
Yep.
I need to really practice. So it was that. Also, however, when you are a brown male model, it is a very different world. I mean, there aren't that many brown male models or actors, especially at that time. And when you were included in a shoot, you were often just a prop. So it was easier for me. It was much more difficult.
Interesting.
For the women, there's no question about it. They're generally center stage. It's the one business in which they tend to get paid more, which is a great thing because they certainly deserve it. But it wasn't quite as difficult as it could have been had I been or fit a different profile.
Yeah. And so from there to do happiness coaching.
Yeah. So then the short story of the rest of it is that I found this program at University of Pennsylvania. It's an applied positive psychology program. It's a master's degree. I entered that program, finished that program. I opened my private practice. At the time, I was journaling and taking all these notes on what was working for me as far as happiness practices. That journal became a book. I pitched it dozens of times to publishers. Nobody was interested. I finally relaxed around it. A publisher was interested. Isn't
that the way though, Rob? I mean, you say that so simply, but I think you're speaking to something really bigger, which when I'm fucking trying so damn hard for the thing, just relax and let it emerge. Like if we could just settle into I like this quote of it's like, be the lighthouse, right? We mentioned the light earlier, right? With each other's like energies. But like when you were trying so hard and like shining your light and be like, hey, come to me, come to me, come to me. But when you can just step back and be like, I've got this light out here and I'm here to offer it to others. And when I'm not trying to force it upon people, look what comes.
Yes.
Be the lighthouse.
Yes, be the lighthouse. That's right. Be the well. The well doesn't go seeking people to quench their thirst. People who are thirsty seek the well to quench their own thirst. Right?
Yes.
So yes, that's exactly it. And honestly, that entire 10-year period was a really practice and experience of surrendering and resting, relaxing. And like both literally, because it was the beach and it's South Beach and it was, party, central and stuff. And it was so much about like Tuesday, it's noon, let's go to the pool kind of thing that, that helped. It helped me a lot because I was such a type A. So when I relaxed, it came. Right? Relaxed, it came. And so book deal came. I had booked a TV show opposite Vanessa Williams, a good friend of mine. And she, was so kind and so generous to write the foreword to that book. That helped a whole lot. I also was booking all these runway shows and other things. And I would meet people along the way, like Lisa Nichols. Somehow was at a runway show. And my good friend was like, hey, Rob, you should meet Lisa Nichols. And Lisa, would you want to do, maybe an endorsement for Rob's book? And I'm like, oh my God, I was so embarrassed. And Lisa said yes. And so, things started just happening on their own without me. didn't set an intention really. I mean, I wasn't trying to script anything. I wasn't trying to manifest anything at the time. I had kind of given up on that. I was like, I don't know. I think I could probably manifest things if I want, but am I guaranteed they'll make me happy? Clearly, my past has shown no. That might not work.
Yeah.
So anyway, opened a private practice, published the book. And a few years later, I got a phone call to do a show on E. I did that for 2 years. And then I got another phone call to do a show on OWN. I did that for a year. And then I did a morning show for 3 years called Good Morning La La Land, mostly a passion project. But yeah, then things just kind of kept developing. But I still remain the same, which is that I just really love being happy and I love seeing other people happy.
So I know when you and I first connected, it was through a summit we spoke on, and there was the question of how would you define happiness? So you had some really beautiful responses. So how do you define happiness for you? I mean, because everyone's gonna have a different answer, but what does happiness mean to you?
Yeah, happiness is not what you do, it's what you are. Happiness, it's not a state of relationship. It's not a state of mind or a state of mood or emotion. It is a state of no mind. It is a state of being. So it's the peaceful aliveness that you feel all the time that you're mostly unaware of. So it's that peaceful aliveness that is underneath, between, beyond, below, and above every single thought, feeling, experience, sensation, perception that you have. It is the naked awareness of your own blind existence. It is simply the I am presence. And so before you know or aware of anything or anybody else in the world, you are aware that you are aware.
Yes.
Right? So it's just
I think awareness is the answer to everything.
It
yes,
is.
the I am presence. You know, I love that so much. It makes me think of this exercise that I do with clients. I don't know if you've ever done this before, but it's really beautiful and powerful. And I like to guide people to do this while sitting in front of the mirror, looking at themselves. And, you know, eye gazing as a practice is hard with another person. Eye gazing with yourself, really hard. And I really encourage people to practice eye gazing with themselves. Anyhow, you write down, and the way I was guided in it and what I would guide others is to write down 100 statements of I am. And it tends to follow some sort of arc of, you start off with attributes. I am, you know, a wife, a daughter, a friend, a sister, a brother, a mother, you know, whatever, like your roles. And then it easily goes into, I've got, you know, I'm 5'2", I've got blonde hair, I've got green eyes, you know, then it kind of goes into our physical attributes. And then we kind of get through the roles and attributes, and then it goes into deeper. I am caring. You know, whatever who we are from that inside, you get through your 100 statements. And then the instruction is to cross off the ones that you're not actively involved in or doing in this particular moment. I'm a mother, but I'm not like mothering right now, but I'm still a mother, but I'm not in role of mother. And long story short, you get to the part where you end up crossing everything off. And what's left is I am.
Love.
And like you're all of it, and yet none of it defines you.
Yes. I mean, such a big yes. I wish I had a billboard that could just, you know, flash yes across the screen. I mean, it's yes. It is nothing, no thing, and nobody. And so the way I sometimes put it is that unhappiness is always a case of mistaken identity. It's always a case of mistaken identity, right?
I know, I had to think about that. Yes.
Yeah. It's you have a personality, but you are not your personality. You have a job, but you are not your job. You have relationships, but you are not your relationships. You have a body, but you're not your body. You have a mind, but you are not your mind. You are that which is aware of the mind, the body, the personality, the job. Yes. Right. And so, and it's only in, we'll call practicing the presence of that, which is the presence of yourself, but it's only in actively and consciously and consistently practicing the awareness, the consciousness, or presence of that for its own sake, for joy's sake alone. Like the way you spend time with your mom, the way I would spend time with you, the way that I do spend time with you or my own mom. You want to spend time with yourself, the self-awareness, in the same exact way. You're just resting in or relaxing in your own I am presence. And at first it feels like nothing. It's like entering a dark room and you're convinced there's nothing inside. But that nothingness of you is like the everythingness. It's the fullness of spirit. It's the fullness of happiness, the fullness of love and joy. But you'll only know it if you can sit in the discomfort, quote unquote, long enough to discover it. And then your eyes adjust. And all of a sudden, what you thought was complete darkness is full of this brilliant, blinding light. And that light is your own.
Yes. And the key for everyone listening right now is you've got to get past that moment of the discomfort. Because usually that discomfort feels so intolerable. They're like, fuck this plan.
Yeah, totally. How long did I put it off myself? How long did you, I can't speak for you.
I did. Yes, 100%. You've got to be willing to be uncomfortable to know it's going to pass.
Yes. And the mind is so tricky and so brilliant. It's an incredible problem solver. It's also a master troublemaker. And so it gets in there and it tells you, this is silly. This is stupid. The pain is going to last forever. Get out of there. Stop this. Go do something, anything. And was it Wayne Dyer or Ram Dass that said, forget about this whole, don't just sit there, do something. We'd say, don't just do something, sit there.
Sit
kind
there.
of thing, right? Yeah. But it's like, just notice the stories that your mind weaves that tells you how painful it is. If you're really paying attention, just dismiss the thoughts. Let the thoughts go for a second. And just notice for a second, is it that painful to just lay there on the bed and breathe or sit there? Is it that? No, it's actually not physically. It's really comforting, relaxing. And it's only this mind.
It's the story I'm telling myself, and it's the narrative I've attached to it that's actually causing the challenge. I remember when my youngest daughter was little, we used to drive to and from Southern California a lot, 5.5-hour drive. And this would often happen when we would be about 40 minutes away from home. And she was probably like 3 or 4 at the time. She would just be tired of sitting in her car seat and her booster. Like she was just like done with the whole thing. And she'd start to get really agitated and she wanted to stand up. And I look back at it now because it was such a mindful response. But her language that she would say was, in her little frustration, to be like, Mommy, I just can't stand with it. Because she would say, instead of like, I can't stand it anymore, the way she would say it is, I just can't stand with it. And my response was, Cammie, well, then you're just going to have to sit with it.
Oh,
it was like the double layer of like, okay, physically you have to sit down. Like you can't stand right now. We're not home yet. And the wisdom to say, I just have to sit with what's hard, and it's not permanent. It's not personal. It's not pervasive. It's not gonna, define like all the things. And I look back, it's like, yeah, just sit with it. And that's the definition of compassion, is to sit with our own suffering or to sit with another suffering. But the mind wants to fix it and solve it and be done with it.
Yes. And that's where all the pain is. That's where all the pain is. All the pain is there. And it seems like it's not there. It seems like in our trying to figure it out, fix it, that's where all the pleasure will be found, the relief will be found. But that's just an escape mechanism that continues to feed the very pain that you're experiencing over and over and over again, right? It's like, it's fascinating. I was always convinced that by worrying about this thing, I was doing something very productive, or by, entertaining or reminding or reliving an experience or pre-living an experience, that I was somehow doing something that would benefit me in some objective or subjective way, when later I only realized I was feeding and fueling the very pain and suffering that I claimed to want to escape so badly, right?
Yes.
So you're right about just sitting with it. And the beautiful part about it is you don't have to do it all at once. In fact, you can't do it all at once. You just do. When the pain or the suffering or the stress or the anxiety or the fear arises, that's an invitation. That's a mindfulness bell to do it in just that one moment, for one breath, for just one breath, and then move on with your day. happens again, another breath. But when you string together these breaths, you discover very quickly that it's like we chase this happy life, but we forget it's the happy moments when string together that make for a happy life, right?
Yes.
It's stringing them together. So it's just a moment to moment thing. And you don't have to do it every moment, but you just want, and you'll enjoy doing it the more you do it.
Yeah. Well, and Rob, I just want to like talk to you for the next 10 hours because like this stuff just fires up my soul. And I get so, I mean, this is why I love doing what I do, because I get to connect with others who we can just have these talks and conversations and hopefully inspire and teach others in the process. But even just personally, I'm like, I don't care who's listening. Like, I'm just excited right now because it's only like me and you right now, and everything else is just, it doesn't matter because there's no attachment to what does this mean? What's the purpose, right? It's just, we get to have this conversation, and there's so much that not only from you and I having in this moment, but now we're going to go to the rest of our day, and that's going to exude to others. And that's like the beauty of when you embody this. That's being a lighthouse, right? You embody this, I embody this, you embody this. And then it becomes like that scene in When Harry Met Sally, like, I'll have what she's having.
Yes.
Right? Like, how do you get that? Well, it doesn't come without work.
No.
And it's the best work you could ever do.
Yes. I mean, to do this work is to make light work out of everything else in your life. I mean, it really is. It's like, yes, there's no question about it. And people say, oh, Rob, this great thing, it sounds like happened, or that great thing happened. And which of these achievements are the one you're most proud of? And I'm like, I don't remember any of them, quite frankly, until someone else brings them up. Because for me, the greatest achievement is always internal. It genuinely is. It's not like a plan. It's like being happy or joyful or at peace. Holy smokes. I thought that was going to be the most impossible thing ever. So impossible that I was willing to kill myself to escape from even having to try any longer. And so you're right about that. It can feel like work often. You can make joy and play of it more and more. You don't need to do it all at once. But if you do this one thing, if you lean into this work or home play, you quickly discover that it makes everything else in your life so much more enjoyable and so much more tolerable and just better.
Yes. Rob, I adore you. I could talk to you again for hours, and I hope we continue this offline because it's so inspiring to be able to see how it looks in action, right? And because it can also be easy to become complacent too. So it's a great reminder to stay active in the mindset of growth and awareness and meditation and mindfulness and wisdom practices, and having people in your circle who uphold the values you want to be living and continue to recognize that none of this is a one and done.
Oh, it's so good, George. And I have to say, you're so rare and you're so precious and you're so priceless in that. The fact that you can come from this extraordinarily robust, empirical driven scientific perspective and simultaneously come from this very artful, skillful, spiritual perspective and integrate that in a way that lets it be experiential, where you're living it. You're living the message itself is really powerful, which is what we all aspire ultimately to do. But I live for these conversations, and I'm just grateful to you for you inviting me into the conversation.
Well, thank you so much for this time. It's been a great start to my morning, and I know I will carry this energy and joy and intention because it's, again, I think this is how we spread the light.
Absolutely.
It's meant to be spread, and God knows the world needs it right now.
Well, I mean,
life is hard right now, and yet to me it's an invitation.
Yes. I don't think the world will be saved through the path of worry, but through the path of celebration. We've tried the worry. We've tried that. I know I've tried that, and I couldn't agree with you more. What the world needs now more than ever are people who are aware of the light, and they're sharing the light, and they're doing it without any expectation of reward or reciprocity or results. Because if you're in it for that, your light's going to be dimmed real quickly. So you have to stay lit up.
Yeah.
It's a joy to stay lit up, not because you're doing something moral or ethical, or you're helping the world, you're helping people that aren't doing as well as you. No, that's great as a side effect, but you're doing it because it feels so good to feel good.
Yes. We're going to end on that, because what more is there to say? We're going to do it because it feels good. Rob, thank you so much. I know this is one of my favorite types of conversations, and I'm not trying to put hierarchy on who I talk to and how I can be in communication with, but this is really, truly lights up everything inside around. This is why we do what we do, is because life is meant to be lived, and there's so much joy and there's so much love and peace and connection. And when we find it, we just got to harness that.
Oh, facts. Preach that all day. Thank you so much. I mean, I think I have these shivers. I call them soul shivers. Like, I'm genuinely so connected, and I feel so uplifted. Thank you so much. Let's continue this conversation soon.
I can't wait. All right, everyone. I hope that you harness this conversation into the rest of your days. Thanks so much for listening.
To continue your journey forward, find Jory Rose on Facebook and Instagram to become part of her growing community. You can also gain access to her meditations, books, online classes, or to sign up for an upcoming retreat. Visit her at joryrose.com. That's JOREEROSE.com.